and welcome to my channel. I'm a Central Texas gardener in Zone 8B, and in today's video I am looking forward to sharing my garden with you. Now this tour is going to feel just a bit different than my regular garden tours because at the recording of this video the channel has hit 5,200 subscribers, and so when I do these videos I really do feel like I'm talking to my garden besties. I know many of us come to the garden to process the things that go on in our lives and throughout our day. And so I wanted to just make this a little bit different and share maybe 3 things that I feel like I'm currently processing in the garden. And I welcome your feedback. If you're learning something about life, whether it's pertaining to the garden or not, and you want to share, feel free to leave that in the comment section below. Along the left here, I've got a ton of Mealy blue sage, and all of this Mealy blue sage that you see here is 3 plants. And I think I have maybe a couple of volunteers in here, but they're pretty tiny. And I've noticed this year that it's had this interesting phenomenon where I have these now white flowers. And so maybe this is just some fun cross-pollination going on. I don't really know, but it's kind of cool. And these are quite leggy, and they really could stand a pruning. Can you kind of see that? And so I often prune these at the end of spring, and then I will also prune them about mid-July, and they can really take it. They're pretty vigorous growers. In front of that Mealy sage is Mexican hat or prairie coneflower, and they're probably the same exact plant, and I don't know why I'm making that distinction in my head, but I always thought that if it was a prairie coneflower, it was all yellow like this one. And then if it was a Mexican hat, it kind of had that burgundy in here. But guys, this is all one plant. All of this is just one plant. And I've got both types of flowers coming off of it. So it's kind of interesting. And then along here, I have got a pink Gulf Moly, and there's nothing really to write home about this one right now because it's just got a giant ant mound in it, and I need to kind of square that away. I don't know if that's going to really harm the plant or not, but these ants, they're something else. I wish I had that level of work ethic because they just spring up like this giant mound overnight, seemingly. Over here, I have got Zexmenia, and I think I've shared with you many times that this is one of my top 3 Texas native plants. I mean, look how pretty that is. And this has got quite a spread here. I mean, this one almost looks like it's got like a good 4-foot spread. It's pretty happy in this spot. It is growing in primarily decomposed granite, and it has readily sent off or reseeded itself, and I've got a lot of little volunteers. Got a little guy here. Will I let it grow? I don't know. I'm getting a little bit better at just letting it ride. If they pop up somewhere, I just sort of let them ride. This is a volunteer from that same plant. So another Zexmenia. And then I have transferred several of those volunteers over here. And so coming along this way, you guys can see those beautiful purple flowers. That is Wright's skullcap. And these really do tend to stay a bit smaller than this if they're in full sun. They stay about 1 by 1 foot in height and spread. These are probably about that in height, but maybe twice that in spread. This is more of a partial shade setting, and so I think that's why these are a little bit leggier or stretched out a bit. And then coming along here, I just wanted to update you on my coleus. So it's coming along, and I hope that all those coleus plants just sort of fill in that area. And then if you're curious, this is a whale's tongue agave. And then coming along here in this pot is a camellia. Now y'all, I had a camellia in the ground here in Central Texas with our super alkaline soil for like 3 years, and it kind of did its thing, but that's not ideal. These are plants that tend to like acid soils, kind of like azaleas and rhododendrons and such. And so I have put, I have this one, and then I have one more in a pot that I use soil acidifier on, and we'll see if they do well. Now, these are evergreens. They prefer a shadier environment, and they bloom in the fall and winter, which is why I like them, so I can get a little bit of fall-winter color. If you're like, what is all that back there? These are the sweet potatoes that I grew last year, and we never ate them because they were kind of covered with all these like cankers and things, and I was like, those don't look super appealing. And then I don't know, I just couldn't bring it in my heart to throw them away, so I have them out here for I don't know what reason, but there they are. Here is that Texas lantana, and this is just one plant, but you can see it's got a nice spread here. This is probably a good 5-foot spread so far. We've had some decent moisture, so it's flowering. These will probably, they kind of lose their flowers as it gets hotter and they get drier, and so if you want them to reflower, you give them a little bit of water. And then I've got another Texas lantana in this pot that I moved from a shady spot. And so it's kind of getting itself established. Is that a big enough pot? Probably not, but I didn't want to toss it, so we'll see how it does in there. And then here is that magnolia, and it's got some blooms. This is a little gem magnolia, and so these blooms are so sweet, and you can see the bees like them too. See all those bees? And so I've enjoyed just walking by this magnolia because it just smells so good. And then here I have a red yucca, and it's also blooming. It's not in a full sun location, so it's pretty small, but it's still getting enough sun to do its thing. And then here is sort of the more functional part of my garden. I've got a rain tank there, kind of a compost enclosure there, a giant brush pile, and I've got a little shaded area there. I'm going to bring out a shade canopy that I built a while ago for this area full of tomatoes, and so I've got some cucumbers there. But then you can also see all my weeds, so that's just kind of how it is. It's just never ending with those weeds. Coming along this side, you guys can see that white autumn sage and how dense it is. I love autumn sage, but I will tell you, between the white, pink, and red, this one seems to be quite a bit denser just in foliage. Although you can help the other ones become denser by cutting out the thicker canes in February, and that does tend to help thicken up the foliage. Here is that rock rose, and this is ginormous. I understand that these are short-lived perennials, but I think this has been in the ground for maybe 2 or 3 years. It's still alive. They reseed very easily, and I've got a ton of little rock rose seedlings back here, so I probably should try to move those and get those ready for when this guy decides it's done. But I've really enjoyed having it in this spot. It fills that area really nicely. And then I've got a couple more sunflowers there. And then I have got my desert willow here. And then I did go ahead and trim back the vast majority of those wine cups. I've got one more plant here, but and it's just hopefully reseed itself well enough to come back next year. And I think that these are actually perennials, so I'm assuming, I've kind of cut them back, but I'm assuming they'll start coming back in the fall rains, but we will see. I have a volunteer Mealy blue sage back here. Wasn't getting much sun, courtesy of the wine cup and the tree it's under, but we'll see if it kind of takes off. Here is a Texas kidneywood, and I've got 2 of these, and their flowers are kind of like sweet almond verbena. They're very fragrant. They should be flowering any time now, but I feel like both of my Texas kidneywoods have always flowered a bit later in the season. I'm not sure why that is, so we will see how they do this year. And then here is a flame acanthus that's kind of squished between this kidneywood and this sea green juniper, and I really have not given this enough space. So in the fall, I'm going to have to probably move quite a bit of this stuff. This is another type of rock rose, but it's got red flowers, and so pretty similar in terms of how it behaves. Kind of gets a little wilty in the afternoon, and those flowers are pretty short-lived, but really pretty color option. So the first thing I want to talk about is garden failures, and I wore the shirt for this purpose, but it says plant lover, plant killer, it's complicated. And I really feel like that has been my story in the garden. I don't know about you. I think for most of us, it is a trial and error sort of experience. And I've heard other gardeners say that we fail forward. And that's probably true of a lot of things in life. I will say just learning how to create an environment that fosters a healthy garden, that is a major undertaking of itself, because you may be from one part of the United States and have moved to another, and what worked well there does not work well here. I've heard plenty of folks who've recently moved to Texas kind of talk about that struggle. But I think the failure is good for you. It's been good for me. Number one, it's helped me just observe more. So instead of constantly doing, sometimes I think these failures really teach me to step back and watch and see what's going on. I also think these failures invite you to sort of release and let go of maybe some controlling tendencies. I'm a type A personality all the way, and I do enjoy things looking a certain way, being tidy. And listen, if A plus B equals C, it better equal that every time. The garden says otherwise. And so that has been really good for me, and learning to roll with the punches a bit better. I do think one of the biggest challenges that many of us face, especially if you're still working, is where do you find the time for gardening? And I have adopted like a 10-minute garden plan. And so what I typically do during the work week is I just do 10 minutes of gardening after I get home from work. I sit for 5 minutes before I start my 10 minutes. I sit for 5 minutes just to kind of unwind and observe. And then sometimes that'll sort of point me in a particular direction that I need to go. I may spend those 10 minutes weeding, or maybe 10 minutes pruning. I may have to redistribute some mulch that's gotten washed out. Or I may have to eradicate some pests. But I do all the gardening I can in 10 minutes, and then I stop because I've got to get dinner on the table, kids to activities, and all the other things. And so if you're struggling to get in the garden, don't think it has to all happen in an 8-hour, 5-hour, even a 1-hour session. I mean, you could really break it down to little 5 to 10 minute sessions throughout your week, and that's been very helpful for me. I did end up transferring a lot of those coral nymph salvias to this area. I had put a bunch of gomphrena seeds down, but they didn't really germinate. So unless I'm going to get a surprise later in the season, I decided to take all of these coral nymph salvia volunteers and sort of move them over here. So hopefully those will establish well. And then another Texas kidneywood. And then next to it here, this is a carrot. And so I got this idea from Joe, and Joe has a YouTube channel called Joe's Texas Garden. And I planted this. I think I I went to the grocery store, got a carrot, and stuck it in the ground in winter. And this is what has come up. And I've got them scattered. I think I got 3 scattered throughout the garden. So I'm so excited to see that flower. But yeah, just a regular old carrot. And then coming along here, the larkspur is starting to go to seed. That's what all of these really pretty flowers are. This is larkspur. And so you can see these are the seed pods that they form, and they're full of seeds. And so I'm going to shake those around where I want them. But they're pretty much going to seed. So at some point here in the near future, I'll probably just go ahead and cut most of those down. I've got quite a bit scattered throughout. Here is another rock rose. And then up here, I have some bee balm. And so that's just now starting to wake up. I'm super excited because here are my coneflowers, and I have not done well with coneflowers until now. And so these are in a morning sun, afternoon shade, and sort of kind of on a slope so that they're not sitting in water. And I think they're doing pretty good here in this spot. And so they look like they're just, I mean, they are just full of all these flower heads here. So I think we're going to get a pretty nice show, and I'm excited about that. But this is the Texas native purple coneflower. And I just think, look, isn't that pretty, that spiral here in the center? So pretty. These are, I think they get up to 3 feet, but I want to say these look like they're like, this one looks at least like it's 4 feet. So I'm excited to see how that progresses throughout the summer. And then again, another Texas lantana here. And all that larkspur is behind it. That'll have to start to prune as it all goes to seed. Coming along this way, lots of red autumn sage. And then another pink skullcap here. And then behind it, I have got those white flowers. That is yarrow. And I think this comes in different colors. I'm interested in trying the yellow one. Now, yarrow, this was green for me all through the winter, so it's got that interest. But it is an aggressive spreader. It does spread by rhizomes, so just something to keep in mind. If you like this, but you don't want it to take over, I think you can stay after it pretty well, but just, you know, it's aggressive. And so coming along here, I transferred some Damianita, and I don't know, kind of they look rough. Maybe those roots are getting well established. I've tried to keep them watered, but we'll see if they survive that transplant. They were previously under that the Mexican had, and they were just getting swallowed by it. And so I knew I had to move them, otherwise they just weren't going to make it. So I have stuck them here, and we will see if they bounce back. Here I have a rue, and this is a host plant for swallowtail caterpillars, and I had at least one swallowtail larval host here, and it decided to pupate, but I couldn't find where it went, because they leave the host plant and then they go somewhere else, and they, you know, they cocoon and then they emerge as a butterfly sometime later, but I couldn't see where it went to. But I don't think I have any swallowtail caterpillars on there now. This is an evergreen plant, gets about 2 to 3 feet in height and spread, and I like it. It's pretty cool. Here is my Greg's Mist flower, and it's not done a lot of flowering yet, though. Here is the beginning of some flowers. I've got some Greg's Mist flower out on the west side of my home, and it's already full of blooms, but this is again more of a morning sun setting, and so this is another very aggressive spreader, and so I'm giving it all of this room to do its thing. Now, if you're wondering, like, what is this stick situation here on your tree? Well, I have a confession. So this is a golden ball lead tree, and you guys know I love it so much. It's one of my favorite things in my garden. But when I planted it, maybe I didn't do a good enough job breaking up its girdling roots. And a lot of times after the rain, the root flare gets covered up. And so that's that part of the tree that extends out and it starts turning into, you know, the root. And some of that should be really exposed. But this was just covered in mulch. So I was trying to expose that. And when I did that, I saw that there were girdling roots. So there were roots circling around, and they were pretty thick. And so I cut the ones I saw, and but then the support of the tree just wasn't there. So this is our solution for now. And you know, I hope it doesn't take this tree out. It looks like there's some stuff going on down here. We'll see how it does. So if you have any solutions or thoughts, let me know. So there I was 18 and a senior in high school, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I wanted it to be something medical, and lab technician sounded great to me. I wasn't sure how to make it happen, and so being a military brat, I said, I'll join the Army. And so I met with a recruiter, said, hey, I think I want to be a lab technician. And he said, okay, and he signed me up for a 91 Bravo. And so I ended up having to go to MEPS, which is like an in-processing thing before you are officially in the Army. And there I had to have a physical exam. And a nurse was preparing me for that physical exam. And she just took a moment and asked me what I wanted to do or what my plan was to be in the Army. And I said, well, I'm going to be a 91 Bravo because I want to work in a lab. And she looked at me and she said, oh, hon, that's not what a 91 Bravo does. That's a medic. If you want to be a lab technician, you need to have a separate designation called a 91 Kilo, and you talk to your recruiter about that. And so I talked to my recruiter about that, and he was probably none too pleased because he probably had a quota to meet, but I did become a lab technician. And I bring that story up to say this. Because I became a lab tech, I had a lot of my prerequisites to go on to higher education, and I am now currently a physician assistant. But I'm not sure I'd be here if it weren't for those few moments that nurse in the San Antonio MEPS, if it wasn't for her taking a few moments to take a deeper level interest in me. And so I often think about that moment, and I think in a world where we have a lot of social media, where it's very easy to stay surface level with people, and I don't think we really get to know folks that way. And I'm not saying you got to take a deep dive into everybody you meet, but especially when it comes to my own children, or especially young people, that nurse's example is something I still try to emulate to this day. Just taking a few moments to maybe consider the person in front of me. What stage of life are they in? What are their interests? And just asking a question or two to really see that person. And that's really just helped me just connect better with people and to see past differences. And so I would say that's a big one for me, getting a little bit below the surface. Last video, I gave you guys a tour, sort of this sort of perimeter landscape here on the edge of my yard. But today I want to share with you some of these foundation plantings. And so first up here is a Texas mountain laurel, and this is an evergreen shrub to small tree. It does flower, and the flowers smell like grapes, but then the flowers turn into these seed pods that are highly toxic. So this may not be a great option if you have it in an area that little kids, curious kids, or pets might have access to. Underneath here is silver pony's foot, and this really kind of died back quite a bit after our freeze. I think you can kind of see some of the remnants over there, but it did come back, and I'm looking to create a living mulch, meaning I've got something that'll just act as a ground cover here and suppress weeds and help with water regulation. All right, coming along here, I just have a couple of little gem boxwoods. And then here I have an autumn sage, and this is a pink variety. And I've got a couple here. I've got that one, and I've got this one. And these autumn sages are, for the most part, evergreen. They get about 3 by 3 feet in height and spread. They flower. They'll kind of stop flowering in the heat of the summer, but the flowers come back with a little bit of moisture. I think this is dianthus. And this is my first year with these. I heard they're very drought tolerant. This is the southwest corner of my home. And so I thought it would be fun to kind of have this just splash of color. These are just, I think the flowers are super interesting looking. Behind that, I have rudbeckia, and this is black-eyed Susan. It's just getting ready to start shooting up those flower stems and take off. And so it's really pretty when it flowers. And then coming along here, I have another Zexmenia. And then here, I have some more pink skullcap. And you can kind of see that these are 1 by 1 feet in height and spread. And that's more typical of these. And I really didn't like these the first season I had them. They were pretty scraggly, but they've really gotten a lot of density the second season. So I like them a lot more. And these are native to Mexico, I believe, versus the purple or the white skullcap, which is native to Texas. And then coming along the corner here, let me kind of back up so you can see. I have 2 crepe myrtles here. These are Catawbas, and they are a semi-dwarf variety. You can see one of them is blooming here. And so these will bloom throughout the summer. But crepe myrtles are known to be pretty messy. Number one, all those blooms are constantly dropping. And then number two, they tend to get aphids. And all that honeydew dropping down beneath it can be really a problem if you have a car parked under a crepe myrtle. But so underneath them, I've got another Texas lantana here, and then another Zexmenia here. And that Zexmenia, this one here is already, I've gotten 2 volunteers that have just kind of started growing. So I've got a little guy here, and then I got another one here. So we'll see if the rudbeckia wins or the Zexmenia win, I don't know. But we're gonna just let it ride. Coming back along this side, I have Greg's Mist flower, and so this is the west side of the house, and it's gotten a lot more sun, and so it's just really blooming pretty profusely right now. And this is well loved by pollinators, especially in the fall with queen butterflies. Though I will say, with this being on the west side of my home, come midsummer it looks pretty rough. It looks pretty dried out and scraggly. So but it comes back after the fall rains. Looking around this way, in this corner here, besides all this spurge, all these weeds coming up, I did go ahead and plant. I have 1, 2, 3 Mealy blue sages, and this is one that has like more white blooms. So I think those will fill in here nicely. We'll see how they do. And then behind it, it's my first year sowing cosmos seeds, and so they haven't flowered or anything yet. They've just started coming up. I think I put these in or sowed these in April, so I thought those might be nice because I think they get about 4 feet in height, so they'll be in the backdrop here behind the Mealy sage. We'll see. And then coming along here, I have a Texas sage, and this is another evergreen shrub, and it flowers. It tends to flower with a lot of moisture, and so sometimes folks call this a barometer bush. These are known to get a little bit scraggly, like a lot of our natives can, but if they do, it responds really well to a heavy pruning, and you can kind of build some of that density back. And this one is San Antonio rose, and I think this tops off at about 6 feet, and so different Texas sages have different size ranges, so just something to keep in mind. Coming along here, you can kind of see that red autumn sage. That's the red flowers here. And then in the front, I have got Blackfoot Daisy, and these are such a cheerful flower. They seem to bloom their best kind of through the spring and again in the fall, with some sporadic blooming in the summer. But I just really like these. And I've got sort of the same thing going on the other side over here of my sidewalk. Here in front, I have got a rock penstemon, and so this is a evergreen shrub that grows like anywhere pretty much, but it does like good drainage. It gets a little bit leggy. I don't know if you can kind of see some of those sprawling flower stalks there, so sometimes I'll have to prune this several times throughout the season. But there you can kind of see the blooms. It's got those tubular shaped flowers that hummingbirds really are into. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about in the garden is how I speak to my children. And in trying to be more mindful about this, I've come across a concept called the magic ratio. And this is a concept that talks about the fact that for every 1 criticism you give to someone, you have to balance it out with 4 to 5 compliments. Now, I don't think this means you just never bring things up unless you got 4 to 5 positive things to say, or that you just flatter people. But I do think it sort of highlights the fact that most of us will receive criticism a lot better if we know that that's not all that's seen about us. And so Being a military brat and having spent 10 years in the military, I'm very much used to an authoritarian style of leadership, and it never seemed to bother me any. But in navigating motherhood, I've realized that that brings its own set of challenges. You know, I certainly want children that know how to respect authority, but I also want children that have good boundaries. And I do think that that's going to take a careful balance between building your children up, but also creating children that are teachable. And so I'm just curious to see if anybody's using this magic ratio in their life, and has it been helpful to you? Or just, you know, any tips about how you strike that balance with your kids. Thanks for letting me share my thoughts and my garden. And until the next one, y'all take care.